I would like to see a show of hands, nothing concealed. Roll up your sleeve, nothing up my sleeve, except my heart. And I believe we've come apart. I would like to see you play your cards, reveal your hand, and show your heart. Maybe we could get it back. With truth and honesty, that's what we need to hold on.
Welcome back from your weekend. We are going to talk about a series of things, most of which I think are intellectually conjoined. But we'll find out, too. I mean, the only way to know, really, is to venture out into the woods. We're going to begin with a remarkable column. You know, sometimes you read somebody's column, you think, oh, he's talking to me. This is exactly what I'm trying to wrap my mind around from a different angle. Roger Cohen often does that for me anyway, but op-ed columnist for the New York Times and author of The Girl from Human Street, Ghosts of Memory in a Jewish Family. He wrote over the weekend about the weightlessness of words in a very specific way. So first of all, welcome back to our show.
Thank you, Colin.
And so set this up for people who haven't read the column. It begins with a kind of a, well, not just unusual, but fairly bizarre political commercial.
That's right. Well, I arrived in Israel about a week ago, and one of the first things I heard was about this strange political ad from the right-wing justice minister, who's a rising star of Israeli politics. People talk about her as a possible future prime minister, whose name is Ayelet Shaked. And this ad features fascism, but fascism in the ad is a perfume. And it's pretty strange, but also troubling, compelling viewing. Essentially, just to go through it quickly, she appears looking pretty sultry, runs a hand through her hair, and then we see this flagon of perfume called fascism. And the narration goes through various things she's been doing as justice minister, essentially trying to restrain the Supreme Court, a foundation of Israeli democracy, calling it a kind of liberal elite super government, goes through all these things against the background of her holding the perfume. Then she sprays the perfume, suddenly turns to a kind of gravelly Israeli voice and says, smells like democracy to me. And that's it. Now, what she's trying to do is say, well, you liberals, you call me a fascist, but there's nothing undemocratic about what I'm doing. It's a pretty curious way to do that.
It is, and it feels, I don't know, this is just me talking, but it feels as though what she's done, and I think we see a lot of this, is to take the word and the concept of fascism like a boot and upend it and shake it until it empties out of whatever was in it. And then at that point, you are free to fill the boot back up with whatever you want. I mean, there's a sense in which, I feel like we internationally are having a crisis not just of politics but of semiotics, and this is like the
semiotics and meaning.
Meaning.
What do words mean? What does it mean when a politician says something? What does it mean when an Israeli politician, we're talking about Israel after all, takes the word fascism, turns it into a perfume, uses it in this completely weightless way, completely stripped of any historical context. And what is context? It is that fascism was seductive, as some perfumes are. It did make millions of Europeans swoon. It then led to the rise of governments in Germany, the Nazis, the fascist party in Italy. And that in turn, of course, led to the mass murder, the industrialized mass murder of 6 million Jews. After the war, 3 years later, the modern state of Israel was born. So when an Israeli does this, it seems to me to be particularly representative of what you were just talking about, Colin, this inversion of everything, this weightlessness of everything. Our president hurling this label of fake news, of course, at my newspaper, at a lot of other good media outlets, when in fact what's fake, what's false, what's a lie is more often than not emanating from the Oval Office, not from the offices of the New York Times.
And you know, if this had sort of been, I don't know, more of an Enlightenment-driven argument. Let's say that she wanted to make this argument, and so she makes a commercial in which she says basically, you know, a lot of people call this fascism. Let me show you why it's democracy, and democracy at its best. You know, there's a commercial that you could make there. We could debate whether it would be more or less insidious, but it would be a commercial that at least proceeded from some kind of argument that either could be refuted or embraced. It seems to me that one of the keys to this commercial is it doesn't really make a linear argument.
No, it makes no linear argument. It's pure symbolism. It gives you a frisson because, well, Shaked is an attractive woman. She's brandishing something called fascism. She's doing it in a rather sensual way. And then she leaps to this political argument that doesn't smell like fascism to me, smells like democracy. But it's something that's not really making, as you just said, any kind of rational argument. It's playing with emotion. And in fact, she is playing with exactly the kinds of things in her role as minister and what she's done. She's playing with exactly the kinds of things that fascism did, which among them was to eviscerate an independent judiciary and destroy one in Nazi Germany. And we could, as I mentioned in the column, have a situation in Israel where Benjamin Netanyahu, who is seeking a fifth term as Israeli prime minister, and is facing charges of bribery and fraud and breach of trust and all kinds of things, where if he wins, he could try to make it a condition of parties joining his coalition that the Knesset, the parliament, pass a law that would prohibit the prosecution of an elected official, i.e. of him. And then you could find that the Supreme Court's power to declare a move like that unconstitutional would simply have been overturned by what Shaked is trying to do in terms of destroying or vastly weakening the powers of the Supreme Court in Israel. And we see in the United States a very similar attack on an independent judiciary from the president sometimes. And it's exactly the playbook of leaders in places like Hungary and Poland that have been laying out a model of what they like to call illiberal democracy.
Well, and let's throw Brazil in now, too, although that's
Brazil, of course, yeah, Bolsonaro.
What Bolsonaro's done there. Once again, you know, reading your column, I flashed to the John Lee Anderson piece about Bolsonaro in The New Yorker, where it just is clear that he's using language and imagery in a way that, once again, has kind of hacked away at the umbilicus that connects a word to its meaning, because you wouldn't be able to use the words. I mean, he talks about, you know, one of his female opponents is not worthy of being raped. He says a policeman has never killed anybody, is not a real policeman. These are things that ultimately they should be disqualifiers, and instead they're qualifiers, which means something's going on with language and meaning.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Trump gets, and after all, he came from the world of entertainment, he came from the world of TV, he gets the power of repetition. He understands absolutely the power of repetition. He repeats slurs about his opponents, and we're going to see that in the next campaign. He repeats the phrase fake news to the point, as I travel around the world, I hear it everywhere. Oh, you're a journalist, you do fake news. You know, it's become standard fare. And you hear alarming phrases like fact-based journalism. I'm sorry, there is no other kind. Fact-based journalism, what is that? But people feel obliged to say it because there is this insidious process taking place where things that were previously regarded as beyond the pale or simply manifest nonsense are now accepted. And to me, one of the most flagrant examples of this in the United States is what's happened to the word truth. It is a fact today that tens of millions of Americans, and I've met them in places like Indiana, Kentucky, there are some in New York, not many, but believe that our president is the most honest president we've ever had, period. Now, for people who believe that an honest statement is one that conforms to the facts, conforms to truth, that's a very alarming view. But no, their view is, well, he tells it like it is, in quotes, and he does what he said he would do on the campaign trail, i.e. in Israel, move the embassy to Jerusalem, get out of the Paris Climate Accords, build a wall at the border, you name it. So we have lost any national consensus on what the word truth means. And that, I would submit, is dangerous.
I think one of the people who predicted this was Neil Postman years ago, amusing ourselves to death. And that notion that we could very easily conflate the appearance of authenticity with truth. And so Trump plays as authentic. If you watch his Grand Rapids speech from over the weekend, the one thing it clearly isn't is some carefully vetted, focus grouped, handled set of words prepared for him by somebody else. It is, it's what psychiatrists call primary process. It's just, he's just saying things that come into his head as they come into his head. And that strikes most people as authentic. Now, there's a distinction to be made between authentic and true.
Absolutely. And similarly in that more than 2 hour rambling speech that he made to CPAC a couple of weeks ago. Listen, I've seen Chavez in Caracas make a 4-hour speech. Hitler made a multi-hour-long big speech to the Reichstag in 1939. Nobody who doesn't have a serious narcissistic disorder and I would say strong authoritarian tendencies makes a speech that goes on for more than 2 hours. But anyway, in that speech, early on, he says, okay, I'm going off script now. I mean, he had a written speech but I'm going off script now. And actually, I'm paraphrasing here. Actually, I'm in the White House because I went off script. I won because I went off script. And he has very sharp, feral, almost, antenna for what people in a very politically correct age want to hear. He releases, enables them to express, whether on Twitter or on social media or just to their friends, things that perhaps they had repressed. And this is what Trump does.
Right. And let's give the devil his due and not deny him that cunning. He has an incredible facility with one of the ones that I was thinking of over the last couple of days. Right after he got into office, clearly some White House lawyer or somebody said to him words to the effect that the way the office is constructed, the way the Constitution understands the office, it may be the case that nothing that the president does would automatically be defined or could be defined as a crime, as an indictable crime. The way that he repeated it to the public was, the president can't commit a crime. And he would say that over again. The president can't commit a crime, as though this were some kind of Kantian statement. That it's like it is like impossible within the laws of the universe for the president to commit a crime. He's really good at that kind of thing. But Roger, I find myself wondering, most of these guys, maybe Netanyahu gets a special category. Most of these guys don't seem smart enough really to invent this system. This system looks like a bunch of birdhouses that they moved into, and I just sort of wonder, who built these birdhouses? How did we get where? I feel as though we probably, and you suggest this in your column, that we probably have some complicity in all this.
Well, sad to say, Colin, I think the birdhouses are built into human nature. The desire when things are difficult to find a scapegoat, the instinct at times, or the attraction, let's say, at times of a strong, inverted commas, authoritarian leader to whom you can submit your your will, abdicate your will, in effect. These are things that I think are present, and if the times are such that there's a feeling among people that they've lost control, that the future is not going to be better for their kids, that the metropole, so to speak, the big cities, its culture has become very foreign and alien, and all these things I think Donald Trump seized on. But you make a very good point. One of the things that we've been illustrating it over, in a way, over the last 10, 15 minutes, the obsession with our president tends to blind the fact that, in fact, he holds up a great big mirror to American society. He would not be in the White House if he had not become the expression of elements in our culture that exist way beyond just his support or his hardline core support. I mean, think of things like individualism, egocentricity, the almost, solipsistic state of many people with their smartphones. We're in a very fractured, sometimes lonely, and very individualistic culture, where community, I think, and the bonds of American society have been weakened. So I don't think Trump is, and this is what an additional thing that makes him dangerous. I don't think he is some weird phenomenon. I think he is a phenomenon that grew out of what American society has become. That's not to say that there aren't tens of millions of Americans who are appalled by this presidency, who believe in words like dignity and decency and honesty and generosity and care, that have traditionally been associated with the highest office in the land, and are appalled to see all this being sullied and smirched day after day. Nevertheless, I think the phenomenon is much deeper and broader than some people think.
All right, we have just a few minutes left. I don't want to use up your day, but I'm going to make my big reach here, and you can just have a bucket of cold water ready to throw on me, okay? I find myself wondering whether one of the other things that happened was that all the words that you just talked about, all those abstractions, important abstractions that you just talked about, they have to attach themselves to a bulwark of the humanities. And there's a way in which, starting in the latter 20th century, not to sound like some University of Chicago conservative intellectual, things got very complicated and relativistic, and not to blame everything on Foucault and Derrida, but there was a way in which there was a central argument being made about the humanities, which is they're much more complicated than the kind of absolutes that you've been dealing with. You have to understand relativism and perspective and stuff like that. And I wonder if we kind of maxed out that to a point where, Trump and people like that are sort of an obvious reaction to it. Oh, yeah, you think it's complicated? It's not that complicated. I'll tell you exactly how simple it is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in that, Colin, actually. I think, liberals tying themselves in knots over various arguments, be they about identity or gender or a whole range of other subjects, every subject, if you like, and along comes a guy who just said, actually, it's damn simple. I'm going to close the border. I don't particularly like Muslims. Outrageous things. I think our representative democracy was mediated through various institutions that were supposed to uphold rule of law, civic discourse, and so on. And the simplifiers now have a very powerful means to get their message across, a very unfiltered means, a totally unfiltered means. And that's to say, Twitter, social media. Will we go back after Donald Trump to a president who doesn't tweet? I don't know. But this exhaustion with complication that you just described happened to coincide with a technology that was the most powerful means to eliminate complication, to make things very direct and simple, that has ever been provided to human beings. And what I think we're seeing is some kind of transition, and we don't know what its outcome will be, from representative democracy to direct democracy. And for now, this direct democracy looks pretty worrying. The premium is on hatefulness, and institutions like a free press, described by the president as enemies of the people, a phrase of pure totalitarian pedigree, or what I described at the beginning is going on with the Israeli Supreme Court. These mediating institutions are just, under assault from, quote, the will of the people, unquote. And we know what the mob can produce from the first half of the 20th century. So I don't want to sound too alarmist, but there are things going on that are worrying. We're in a moment of transition. The sort of post-45 world order, I think, is, that's over. What is going to take its place is not clear, and you only have to look at Brexit and the complete mess there to see what plebiscitary democracy, driven by fake news, that phrase again, can produce.
Well, Roger Cohen, I don't think we solved anything. On the other hand...
No, sorry, that was a very rambling answer.
No, I loved it. No,
this very cogent question.
Roger, to me, it was a tonic. It was the tonic I needed. All right, op-ed columnist for the New York Times, author of The Girl from Human Street, Ghosts of Memory in a Jewish Family. Roger Cohen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Now we're going to, I think, proceed in an orderly fashion towards one of the fringes of the phenomenon that we were just talking about. So what happens when one of these creatures who's born in that strange, twisted fold where truth and falsehood blur, what happens when one of those creatures is called to account for himself? And of course, I'm talking about Alex Jones. You'll find out. Yes, I think this next segment will fit well together with the preceding segment. And that's what we want segments to do, right? So, yes, we're going to talk about Alex Jones. In a better world, Alex Jones just wouldn't matter. But that, unfortunately, I guess this is not a better world. Alex Jones and his InfoWars seem to be capable of distorting public opinion, influencing possibly the president of the United States, and hurting people. And it is this latter quality that we're going to talk about and what happens when he gets called on the carpet about it. Joining us to do that and to talk in particular about the recent depositions in a defamation suit is Charlie Warzel, opinion writer at large for the New York Times. Sort of like the New York Times radio hour today, but that's good. I think that's a good thing. Charlie, are you with us?
I'm here.
So, Alex Jones, I guess I don't really have to explain who Alex Jones is, but maybe if I do, he is, even by the standards of conspiracy-orienting, fear-mongering, hate-mongering, extremist media, he's like something that crawled out from under that rock, like they didn't let him on top of that rock. So InfoWars obviously become kind of famous, and it's pretty difficult to do very much about Alex Jones because we have a constitution that guarantees a free press and that guarantees free speech. What you've encountered here and what you've been covering is one of the rare exceptions to that reality. So what's going on with Alex Jones right now?
Well, so Alex Jones is currently embroiled in pick your the way you want to describe it, a parade of lawsuits, I think is what I said, but it's a series of lawsuits, defamation lawsuits, from parents of the children who were slain in the Sandy Hook shooting back many years ago now. And Alex Jones has long said that he's had numerous sort of conspiratorial takes on the Sandy Hook massacre, that it was potentially a false flag operation conducted by the government in a long ploy to sort of grab Americans' guns and change gun laws, that it was staged. He's enlisted the help of numerous sort of online vigilante investigators to try to I don't want to use the word harass explicitly, but to look into the families, and which has led to harassment of the families of the victims. And so they've taken legal action, and Jones has been deposed in this lawsuit. And the deposition, which is a little over 3.5 hours, was posted on Friday afternoon to YouTube by one of the legal teams, and it is a incredibly compelling document that really shows Alex Jones in a way that that the public has never seen him before. He's subdued. He's sort of unable to be in control, and as a result, it is a way to see this shock jock that is unfamiliar to many people.
All right. Well, let's hear a little bit. Yes, this deposition is up on YouTube, as Charlie says. It's there for you to pick through as you see fit. Here's a little bit about what it would sound like.
I want to ask you about photos of the children. So I'm going to play a video clip about something you said about photos of the children. This is something you said on September 25th, 2014. Can you play photos of children?
And then photos of kids that are still alive, they said died. I mean, they think we're so dumb that it's really hidden in plain view.
Mr. Jones, you can admit that statement was absolute nonsense. There are not photos of children who died who are actually still alive. That's not.
That is an out of context clip. I can't even respond to something like that.
You said it though, didn't you?
I don't know what it's in context to.
Is there a good context to that, Mr. Jones? That people's children who are dead, there's actually photos of them still alive? Can you give me the good context?
There's no way to respond. I don't know what it is.
I know what it is. It's a video of you saying that there are photos of children who died who are still alive, and I'm asking you, that's absolute nonsense, isn't it, Mr. Jones?
Objection is to form.
No, it's not. I don't know the context of that video.
So, Charlie, I mean, watching some of these deposition tapes, it is a little bit like watching the lawyers try to nail Jell-O to the wall. I mean, Jones is slippery. He'll claim something's a Media Matters clip that's been edited in a way to make him look as bad as possible. But on the other hand, as you're suggesting, a lot of the bluster, anyway, has gone out of him, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm somebody who's watched, probably in my reporting on the sort of conspiracy fringes and Alex Jones specifically, watched hundreds of hours of his show. I've spent a lot of time sort of trying to chase him around. I've had panels that I've done at excuse me. I've had panels that I've done at festivals interrupted by him with a bullhorn. He is somebody who you cannot have a conversation with. You cannot have any, you never even get the floor in the conversation. It's not just simply that it's not a good back and forth. It's that you never get the chance to speak. He hijacks every single instance of conversation and sort of filibusters in his own way. He talks over, he floods the zone with all kinds of different theories. He goes a mile a minute. It's impossible to keep up with him. And he has no respect or regard for whoever he's in a possible dialogue with. And so what's so fascinating about this document, as opposed to all of that, is he can't really do that. He has to answer in such a way as to not have them object as non-responsive. And even though he's not confessing anything grand in these depositions, you get to see someone badger him as a result. You get to see him be out of control, of not being able to have the narrative. When they ask him a question and he plays dumb, then they get to the lawyers play a video clip that shows, that he was either lying or misrepresenting himself in some way. And it's really, it's remarkable in that way. No one's really been able to do that before to him.
If there was sort of an epic moment, it might have been when he basically claimed that he had suffered from a psychosis at one point, that he was in the grip of some delusion that he was not able to control that made him see conspiracies.
Yeah, this is, it seems like, so the last time that Alex Jones was on trial in any capacity was a 2017 custody case with his wife, child custody case. And at that point, one of the defenses that he gave for not bringing his InfoWars clips into the courtroom was that it was all sort of performance art to some degree. So that was the big revelation of that one. This psychosis thing seems to be sort of akin to that, the big defense, if you will. Alex walked back that 2017 performance art comment numerous times after it became clear that, that was a threat to his audience in some way. And I think we're going to see the same thing likely happen here, where he's going to say, "Oh no, that was taken out of context. That was, what I was trying to say was I was young and I was naive." And he's going to walk that back, I think, because a big threat to Alex for his listeners is for people to think that in any way that he's a non-believer in this. So I'm not so sure that revelation shows anything more than he's willing to say anything he needs to say to weasel out of the situation.
Now, he's been sort of banned or scrubbed off certain social media sites. He's got these lawsuits coming at him. But I don't know, how much of an existential threat is there still to Alex Jones Nation? It seems to me he's got, 5 million or so people who spend time with him and take him somewhat seriously. I don't know what you could or would do to ultimately change that. And it might even be the case that some of these things he can ultimately convert into fuel as opposed to the dissipation of his powers.
That might be true. It's really hard to tell where this is going to go down which road. But what I will say about Alex is one of the ways he stands out is he makes most of his money, if not nearly all of his revenue, selling these supplements that he markets towards his viewers on his store. They're nootropic brain pills and things like that, and vitamins and sort of tonics and mixtures. And he makes a lot of money off of these, and it sort of insulates him from, that pressure that someone like, say, Bill O'Reilly or Tucker Carlson might get when people call for an advertiser boycott. It insulates him greatly. But this trial threatens that to some degree, not only because of the restitution he might have to pay to numerous families. And, there's a possibility that it could, severely drain his finances. But the other thing is that, he's been called to provide his finances to the court, and his finances, could become a part of real public record in a granular way. We might see how he makes this money. It's possible that, different government organizations might scrutinize some of that, including, his supplement business. I think what we're seeing is these lawsuits are exposing him in a way that he's never had to be exposed before. And I think if there is any chance that he will face consequences, it's going to happen through this. Right.
To me, it kind of alters the calculus of being Alex Jones. One theory, I don't know, I'm not necessarily saying people should embrace this theory in their own lives, but one theory about what happens if you encounter, say, a black bear in your neighborhood or somewhere is that you want to seem a little bit bigger. You want to seem like the bear is still basically making kind of a cost-benefit analysis about approaching you versus not approaching you. And in a way, the Newtown families, the Sandy Hook families, are kind of doing the same thing, right? But on the one hand, Alex typically gets rewarded for the most outlandish tripwire kicking claims that he can possibly make. He has very little disincentive not to make that kind of claim. It's his bread and butter. It's what makes the engine go. What provides the eyeballs that then buy the supplements. So in a way, to have a group of motivated plaintiffs who are saying, well, no, I'm actually going to make this a little bit more difficult for you. And you're going to think twice before you say certain things, because there actually are consequences in addition to the benefits that you perceive. I guess I just sort of wonder. I mean, we don't really know yet, right, Charlie, whether or not that works.
Right. We don't know that. But I think you make a great point, which is that the conspiracy theory ecosystem and even I'll go a tiny step further and say a lot of the sort of shock jock pro-Trump media ecosystem, it's asymmetric warfare. There's a lot, like Alex Jones sort of disguises what he does in journalism. He always says, I have my sources, I have this, that. If you look at his set, it's almost like a CNN set. It's well done. It looks like he's an authoritative journalistic force. But in reality, he's not playing on the same playing field. There is no InfoWars standards and practices. There are no, he's allowed to toss out specious claims and polarizing statements without fearing that he'll either lose his job or that there will be any real retribution. And that asymmetric balance between that and a regular media outlet, which does have to deal with all of that, with libel, with all defamation, with all sorts of things. This lawsuit is sort of trying to level that playing field. It's trying for the first time to bring some consequences to, libelous speech or harassing speech on behalf of him. And I think that has the potential to set a really fascinating precedent. Obviously, we don't want to, curtail the speech of people, but if it is defamatory, if it is, causing a real world harm to people, that is something that I think, could really change the way that some of these shock jocks work.
I'll just quickly tell a story. I used to be sort of the House liberal at an otherwise conservative commercial CBS-owned radio station that had Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that on the air. In fact, Rush Limbaugh's show preceded my own. And he would sometimes say similar kinds of things that had no basis in fact, things that seemed kind of borderline defamatory, things that in any kind of normal journalistic ecosystem you wouldn't say if you couldn't prove. And every once in a while I would just hear one in the hallway and I would look at the program director and I would say, well, we got to do something, and we'd probably run a correction or something. And they would just laugh at me because none of it worked that way. None of it wasn't answerable to any of those kinds of standards unless somebody made it answerable. And Charlie, one thing that I do think is when this period of history, the last, say, 4 years of history, can be studied, I do think that people are going to look at the kids from Parkland and these parents from Sandy Hook, and they're going to say, this might actually have been the birth of a new kind of activism, a group of people who said, you know what, first of all, we have access to some of the same media tools and social media tools as some of the people who are bothering us right now or causing harm to us. And if we're effective in using them, if we're smart and judicious about using them, we don't have to be passive all the time. And I do see some commonality between what's happening to Jones right now, and of course Sandy Hook's also doing some stuff about liability, firearms and stuff like that too. And the young Parkland people who just said, no, we don't have to take this.
I think that's really true. I think that there is a level of being fed up here and really just an idea that there need to be consequences for truly reckless and harmful speech. I think we looked at, online harassment back in, let's say, the late aughts and early 2010s as almost not quaint, but we looked at it as, oh, that's a problem for the internet, right? That is something sort of small. The consequences are low, and we can kind of laugh it off or ignore it. Don't feed the trolls, people said. That was kind of the claim. And now we see that there is a lot of real world harm that can be done, and that it adds up, and people are fed up with it. So they're looking at these tech platforms and saying, this can't stand. We need change. Same thing with, the way the Parkland teens reacted to mass shootings. Like, this isn't something we can brush aside anymore. We refuse to let this be the status quo. And I think we're seeing that with certain parts of misinformation, conspiracy theories. We're seeing the harm in the real world to real people. And I think that, all it really takes or can take is an interested, motivated party to stand up and say, we're not gonna sit by and let this happen. There's going to be consequences.
All right, Charlie Warzel, opinion writer at large for the New York Times. Thank you so much for doing this with us. We're going to take a break. I'm going to give you the phone number right now, though, because the final segment of the show today will be yours. It'll be your playground. as Madonna would say. And you can call 860-275-7266 if you want to respond to anything you've heard so far in my conversation with Roger Cohen or my conversation with Charlie Warzel, or say things about horrible Alex Jones. But there's other things to talk about as well. We almost did a Joe Biden segment today, and I don't know. I decided not to. I'll explain why maybe on the other side. But I'm not opposed to talking about Joe Biden here. 860-275-7266. You tell me what we're going to talk about. 860-275-7266.
Use in the truth if you can't tell a lie sometimes. What's the use in the truth if you can't tell a lie?
Today's show was produced by Betsy Kaplan with help from me, Kyone Wolf. And the part of Bill Curry was played by Glenn Beck. On tomorrow's show, a shocking story about parents who swap out their parental rights to get treatment for their kids. Now, back to Colin.
Yeah, this is going to be a pretty serious show tomorrow, but I think I'm glad we're doing it. I'm glad Betsy Kaplan, our senior producer, has it well in hand. All right, so I said open phone lines. There are open phone lines. 860-275-7266. And let's go to Adam. Adam in New Milford. Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, how are you?
All right.
First off, I want to say I hope your knee's been better. My father went through the same thing, and one of his knees going through surgery actually helped the other one, so I hope kind of the same thing is going for you.
Well, it's a long story. Let's not talk about it.
Okay. So my comment / question is, I'm not as worried about Alex Jones as I am of the 5 million people who follow him. So my question is, do you think something like a baloney detection kit, something Carl Sagan talked about in the 80s and 90s, a way to tell truth from fiction and science from just plain nonsense, should be taught at a younger age, so that maybe people who grow up with the internet and with a lot of information at their fingertips that could be real or fake or somewhere in between, maybe have a better way of parsing the information. And so maybe, we also need to look at raising children so that they kind of learn at a young age how to be logical and how to maybe avoid being dragged into conspiracy theories altogether.
Well, I mean, obviously, from your lips to God's ears. But I mean, I also think, and we should say, media literacy and other names for exactly what you're describing. There's an incredible vogue for that right now, not only here in the United States, but really all over the world now. It is now being recognized that part of education is going to be learning exactly those kinds of discernments. That said, unfortunately, the human race, it has certain appetites kind of wired into it that I think are going to be very difficult to eradicate. And so, yes, I think you can teach people how to look at something and ask a few relevant questions to it. And you can even teach people how to have I'll just take an extra second in here and say, so I was started out as a newspaper reporter in 1976. And one thing I picked up from a city editor one time was this thing that I still think about it all the time. It's called the 3-minute mile rule. And what it is if somebody shows up here in the newsroom and says he can run the mile in 3 minutes, he probably can't. You're free to spend the afternoon, go down to the high school with a stopwatch and time him at the track and stuff like that. But chances are he can't run the mile in 3 minutes. And you have to do a kind of triage with information. If you treat every single claim as worthy of the same amount of investigation, verification, or disapproval, you're going to waste a lot of time. Now, the problem with that rule is it's a heuristic rule. From time to time, you'll miss like the greatest story ever because you'll think it's another guy claiming to run the 3-minute mile. But there are things like that you can teach people. But I don't know that, that Alex Jones is appealing to something very, very different, which is the incredible desire that people have to believe that things have been concealed from them. There is a thrill associated with the idea that things have been concealed and they are now being revealed to you. And I don't know whether it's going to be all that easy to get rid of that. The other thing, I'll say one quick thing about that, though, because it's something that my friend Humphrey Tonkin, the former president of the University of Harvard, said recently, at least in my presence, and it stayed with me, which is that we are spending a tremendous amount of time right now fact-checking things that we think are not true. So things get said, they're not true. We fact-check them. We try to provide an accurate, corrected version of reality, which, I mean, we kind of have to do that. That's the game we're in. But Humphrey, he just kind of planted this as food for thought. I'm going to plant it with you as food for thought. He said, maybe we're giving short shrift to truths. Maybe we should spend more time on, instead of spending all of our time picking apart lies, we should spend some of our time on the affirmation of truth, things that we really know at some kind of Keatsian level to be true, that we can almost lose sight of that. We're spending so much time playing whack-a-mole with guys like Alex Jones. So it's another way to think about this whole problem. Anyway, let's see. We have two Daves, or a Dave and a Dave. I'll go to Dave in, oops, I didn't do it. I'll go to Dave in North Branford. Hi, Dave, you're on the air.
Hey, Colin, how are you?
Okay.
Good. So I get to listen to your show infrequently when work and my schedule permits. One thing I'm struck by listening to you when I do is, to me, and I guess I would describe myself as a moderate. I can go both ways on the political spectrum depending on the topic. But what I'm struck with your guests and some of your statements is you seem to lend credence to people like Trump when they claim that there's a liberal media bias. I never seem to hear anyone that, I don't want to say espouses, but maybe supports a more conservative view or a more, for lack of a better term, Trumpian view when you have these interviews. And I fear that what that does is that plays into the claims of a liberal media bias. And when people like Trump or I didn't really get to hear much of the Alex Jones segment. I don't really care much about him. But people like that, when they make these claims, you're sort of giving them the kernel of truth by not fleshing out maybe and having a guest.
Well, first of all, I hear the point you're making. I just, in the interest of time, I don't know. We've had Milo Yiannopoulos on. Is that conservative enough for you? We had Jordan Peterson on. Is that conservative enough for you? I mean, we're not. I'm certainly not afraid of talking to conservatives, and I'm certainly also not.
My point was that it's skewed. I didn't say you never have any of them on, but it always seems that there's the more liberal view, which.
Well, we've had people that we've had a lot of people from the National Review, people like David French. I mean, people who don't necessarily support Trump, but are conservative writers, good, strong conservative writers. I mean, right now, I don't really need to have a conservative on to criticize the Democratic president because there isn't one. Right now, basically, there's one group of people who are in power right now who are handling Supreme Court appointments and foreign policy and economic policy and immigration policy who are in need of scrutiny. And it's Trump and his minions. And I'm not sure what would be the point. I mean, we have had Milo Yiannopoulos on. We have had Jordan Peterson on. We have plenty of these kinds of people. But, in a general way, what sort of mission would I be accomplishing if I made sure I had people on who thought that shutting down the government in order to build or to force the building of a wall at the border was a really good idea? I mean, what sort of watchdog role would I, or the new threat to close the border or pick something? What would that really accomplish? I can promise you the next time there's a Democratic president, I will have lots of people on to criticize what that president does, because I think that's a big part of what the media does is to provide checks and balances. But I don't worry about that too much. I think basically we're doing what our job is. Maybe we could tilt it a tiny bit more to the right, but I think Dave's wrong. All right. Well, listen. Thanks for listening. I wish I'd gotten the other Dave on, David, whatever his name is. And we will be back tomorrow with a show that you will find disturbing, I fear.